It's approaching noon on Riverside Raceway here in Southern California. The crowds are spread around the 9-turn road course waiting for the green flag, marking the final race of the season in Winston Cup Grand National Stock Car Competition. One man on the starting grid in this elite world of Grand National racing has brought his wife to be with him until the last minute before starting his engine. Bobby Allison, the man from Alabama, the scarred, tough veteran of the sport who has won just about everything in the world of racing except the Winston Cup, the National Driving Championship. Judy Allison. This lady has seen enough racetracks in America to last anyone 6 lifetimes. She's been through good times and bad in the 23 years of her marriage to this legend that she knows as her husband. For most of his career, Allison has been chasing the elusive Grand National title, and today it's within his reach once again. 5 times he has been this close, only to be forced to settle for second best. Friends in the sport come to wish him luck. He'll need it. It rained all night, and the weather continues to threaten. That's bad news on a tricky, shifty road course. This track is nothing like a high-banked super speedway or short track back in the Carolinas. All in all, this man from Alabama wishes he was back in Dixie, on southern turf where the racetracks only have left turns and the grandstands and infields are filled with fans who know and love him as the leader of the Alabama gang. But Dixieland wasn't always friendly this year. The man from Alabama has not forgotten how it all began. Away down south in Daytona just about 9 months ago in a race featuring the drivers who had won pole positions in the previous NASCAR season. It was a dream race for the fans. For Bobby Allison, it was the first of his nightmares at Daytona. Allison was the defending champion in the race when only 3 laps into the 50-mile sprint he hit some oil on the track and lost control in turn 4. The DiGard Racing team's new Chevrolet Monte Carlo was totaled and had to be scratched from the starting list for the 500-mile race. Allison would have to re-qualify a new car. In the garage area the following day, Allison talked with driver Neil Bonnet, a longtime friend and neighbor from Hueytown, Alabama, while the DiGard crew readied their second car to qualify for the race on Sunday. This second car is the machine that made Daytona history last year when Allison and the DiGard team won it all. They finished first in the pole clash, won a twin 125 race, went to the winner's circle in the Daytona 500, and returned on the 4th of July to capture the Firecracker 400. With this unprecedented sweep, Allison and DiGard became the most successful team in the 24-year history of the Daytona International Speedway. Less than 24 hours after the crash, the DiGard team had their second car ready for a practice run.
Track is open for Grand National practice.
Bobby Allison joined crew chief Gary Nelson and the rest of the team on pit row and watched the other cars on the track. In their first year with Allison as a driver, the 10-year-old DiGard team had a record-breaking season that included 8 victories, 7 on the super speedways like Daytona. The only honor that had eluded them was the Winston Cup, and that had only slipped out of their grasp in the final race of the 30-event season. This year, the entire team was back with a full season's experience in working together. Confidence was high that this year would be their championship season. Allison took the 22 car out on the track for a practice run, and Gary Nelson with the rest of the crew watched as Allison turned in a lap on the 2.5-mile high-bank tri-oval of 198 miles an hour. The car was in great shape. The crew was pleased. Then they heard a crash in the backstretch. Nelson checked the flagman. He was waving yellow. He looked again to his stopwatch, then to turn 4 to see if the 22 car would come in on schedule. It didn't. In the 43 seconds it took to run a hot lap at Daytona, the mood of the team had changed. The question on all of their minds was, how bad is it? How is Bobby? How is the car? Allison went to the infield hospital, apparently all right. The wrecker brought in the 22 car, totaled. With that amount of frame damage, it might be able to be fixed, but it would not be competitive. Nelson took command of the situation and began to delegate responsibilities. As Gary hurried through the garage area, he joined Elvin Rector and they began to make plans. They could rent a car from one of the other teams and be back on the track within an hour. They discarded that idea. It's not DiGard style. They wouldn't really be competitive. The #1 goal is not just to get in the race, but to win. It's not likely they could win with a rented car. Only one more car was available that could be made race-ready by the NASCAR deadline tomorrow. It was in the DiGard garage back in Charlotte, North Carolina. 2 crew members would take the next available flight out of Daytona and bring that car to Florida. DiGard's engine builder, Robert Yates, recognized by most as the #1 man in the sport, looked at the results of months of preparation and testing turned into scrap metal. At a cost of approximately $80,000 per car, the power and handling advantage that DiGard had brought to Daytona was now $160,000 worth of salvage parts and wrinkled sheet metal. While the second wreck was being loaded onto the truck, the press sought out DiGard team owner Bill Gardner for his reaction to his team's misfortune during the past 24 hours. The semi-doors were closed on 2 race cars that were now history. The third car arrived from Charlotte at 3:30 in the morning, and the entire crew went to work to meet the NASCAR deadline for qualifying. The accidents had placed the DiGard team far behind the rest of the field in preparations for Sunday's event. The garage area opened at 7 a.m. as the sun rose over turn 3. The skies were threatening rain coming in from the west. In order to qualify, the car had to be through NASCAR inspection by 10:30 and make its qualifying run before the rain could shut down the track.
I suggest if you're going to qualify today, you get them to the gas pumps, get them through inspection. 5 minutes after the last car rolls, qualifying will be over.
Bobby, now it looks good now. Let's keep it looking like that here.
Oh, man, tell me about it.
Bruised and sore, Allison would attempt to qualify his 3rd car this week. He had won at Dover and Richmond in this car last year. However, the car was built for the short tracks, not the super speedways, and it wasn't very aerodynamic. The crew was concerned as they watched their last chance to qualify.
Pulling out of the track to take his 2 laps of qualifying this morning, Bobby Allison from Hueytown, Alabama. Really had bad luck all week long here at Daytona, having 2 cars demolished in the last couple of days. This is the 3rd car that they brought to Daytona. Bobby Allison out to make his qualifying run this morning.
The car appeared to be handling well, and it looked like it was capable of turning a lap in just under 47 seconds.
46.820 seconds for Bobby. 46.820 the speed. 192.226. The car late yesterday afternoon or sometime last night, and Bobby is attempting.
Allison qualified the 3rd car with a speed of 192.304. He is now one of 72 drivers trying to make it into Sunday's starting lineup of 42 cars. The concerns were not yet over for Bill Gardner and Gary Nelson. Their number 22 car was still not in the race. 3 days before the 500, the field is split into 2 equal groups for 2 125-mile races that reduce the size of the field and set the starting order for Sunday's event. Allison blew a tire in his 125-mile qualifying race and finished in 17th position, a lap down from the leaders. Jim Gardner, Bill's brother and the president of DiGard Racing, reflected the team's disappointment. Allison would race on Sunday. However, he would have to be added to the starting field through the provisional promoters option. What a difference between this year and last. Upwards of 40,000 people on the infield at Daytona were only part of the crowd of 130,000 expected for the opening of the Grand National season. Vice President George Bush was the honorary starter who would wave the green flag down on the first $1 million event in stock car racing history. As the fastest Daytona 500 field ever headed into its first lap, Allison was running 35th on the grid on the inside, 3 rows from the end of the pack. Each of the cars racing today had qualified in excess of 190 miles per hour. That means that all of these machines are capable of covering the length of a football field in 1 second. Today was Judy and Bobby Allison's 23rd wedding anniversary. She would spend the day in the pits keeping the lap chart for the team. She hoped her husband could move up from the back of the pack to run up front where he has been most of his racing life. In 1978, Allison started 33rd here at Daytona and picked his way through traffic to win. She knew he could do it, but the car couldn't. When the afternoon would finally end, Allison would finish 9th. He would have to start his run at a championship season without the crown jewel in the Winston Cup. However, he wouldn't have to wait long to take his first checkered flag. 1 week later, on the half-mile oval at the Richmond Fairground Raceway, Allison would not have to return to the garage area, but would drive down pit row into Victory Lane for his first win of the young season. The rain plagued the Carolina 500 throughout the afternoon. Speedway officials tried to dry the track between showers so the race could continue. If the race was stopped, the vehicles would be impounded under guard in the track garage area until a restart next Sunday. Gary and Bobby felt confident that from the strong second position they held, that they could go up front and win. Finally, NASCAR red flagged the race at 143 laps, just over 145 miles completed. During the intervening week, moisture apparently got into the ignition, and after Allison took the lead on the restart, the car was missing. The crew struggled with the problem, finally solving it, but they had to settle for a 10th place finish. After Rockingham, the spring rains came to Georgia, delaying the Atlanta 500 for 1 week. The DiGard team had decided to continue the season in the Buick, considering it more competitive than the Chevrolet. Allison had qualified the new car at 165.906 on the beautiful mile-and-a-half speedway. The first lap of a stock car race is like being inside your car going home after work in rush hour traffic, bumper to bumper at 160 miles per hour. Every driver is willing to cut inside of you, around you, or bump sheet metal side by side with you in order to get into a curve first or down the straightaway faster. You become part of a steel ribbon of speed. was apparent in the opening laps that the 22 car was having problems. From his fourth place starting position, Allison drifted back through the traffic. Nelson knew in the early minutes of the race what was wrong with the car. All it would take him was about 20 minutes in the garage to set it right. There would be no opportunity to do that. They would race the best they could with the setup they had. The car should have been able to go 60 laps at Atlanta before a pit stop. However, an unscheduled pit stop on lap 35 turned into a 4-tire stop under green that lost Allison a lot of ground. The DiGard crew performed with precision, but it was one of their longest afternoons. Allison had to retire 25 laps before the checkered flag with a blown engine. A 25th place finish, the DiGard team's first time out of the top 10 this season. After Atlanta, the Grand National Circuit heads north to the Carolinas and Virginia. The Trans-South 500 was the first of the April races. The 22 car dominated the track at Darlington until a $2 part of the power steering went out. Allison finished 8th and moved into the top 3 in Winston Cup point standings for the first time in the season. At the Northwestern Bank 500 in North Wilkesboro, the car finished 2nd, and Allison moved to 2nd place in the point standings. At the Virginia National Bank 500 at Martinsville, the 22 car ran strong the entire race and finished in 3rd place. After 7 races in the season, Allison had vaulted to 1st place in the race for the National Driving Championship. It took a speed of 193 miles per hour to make the starting lineup at the Winston 500 at Talladega. The 22 car started in 19th position and ran well, moving through traffic up to 10th place. A perfectly timed pit stop early in the race moved the 22 car up front where Bobby could run with the lead pack. The DiGard team was having an outstanding day when Allison came into the pits under caution on the 67th lap of the 188-lap race. As 6 men went over the wall, Roy Thornley reached out with his pole to wash Bobby's dust-encrusted windshield. The 4-tire stop and refueling was moving with DiGard-style precision. It looked routine. It wasn't. Fuelman Wayne Baumgartner went under the car even before jackman Harold Pennell could get it off the ground again. The U-joint had broken when the car was dropped off the jack. There wasn't a spare one in the pit. A crewman would have to run all the way back to the garage area in the infield to get one. The DiGard team felt helpless. They did their best to make use of the time until the replacement parts arrived. To help Bobby's vision when he could get back to racing, Pat Broyles and Tim McGinnis replaced the windshield. Tire man Norman Kushimizu watched with Gary as the entire team spent the rest of the day hoping to find an opportunity to make up the distance the 22 car had lost. They never did. Allison had to settle for a 10th place finish, and he slipped back into 2nd place in the point standing for the Winston Cup. In the Marty Robbins 420 on the half-mile track at Nashville, Allison started 11th and finished 2nd. In the Mason-Dixon 500 on the 1-mile track at Dover, Delaware, Allison started 10th and went up front to lead 7 times for a total of more than half of the 500 laps of the race. His performance put him back into 1st place in the points race. Back on a half-mile track at Bristol, Tennessee, Allison started 12th and finished 2nd. The 22 car completely dominated the World 600, which is the longest race on the trail to the Winston Cup. Allison led the race for 188 of the 400 laps of racing. 137,000 race fans were assured of an Allison victory. When 86 miles from the finish, the 22 car got mixed up with Bill Elliott's car in turn 4 and spun out onto pit row and came into the DiGard pit. The collision had knocked the alignment off, and both front tires were towed out, which gave the car all of the handling finesse of a Sherman tank. However, it was still strong, and Allison drove to a third-place finish. He increased his hold on the national championship race by a margin of 190 points over his nearest competition, Richard Petty. The 12-race marathon from Memorial Day to the last weekend of July that makes up most of the long, hot summer of Winston Cup competition is a real grind for the Grand National teams. Without a weekend off and little time for their families, the drivers and crews cross the country from east to west and north to south, from California to Pennsylvania down to Florida and up to Michigan. In addition to the competition, there's a lot of travel time, and if a team has problems either with personalities or racing equipment, there isn't much time to fix it. They just have to keep racing. The 13th race of the season at Riverside, California was bad luck for the DiGard team. A faulty distributor forced the car into the pits for repair, and Allison had to settle for a 22nd place finish. But the following week at Pocono, Allison dominated the event and went to victory lane for the third time this season. Coming off the win at Pocono, Allison went to Michigan and finished second. Then on to the 4th of July race at Daytona to begin the second half of the season. Because of an accident early in the race, the best he could do was finish 14th. At this point, Allison was 212 points ahead of his closest competition for the championship cup. However, that competition was Darrell Waltrip, driver of the number 11 car of Junior Johnson. It had taken Waltrip half a season to get into second place in the points race, but he is the two-time defending national champion and a strong finisher. Waltrip would definitely be a factor from now to November. 2 more top 5 finishes, a 4th at Nashville and a 3rd in the second race at Pocono, kept Allison's 200-point margin intact. But the summer race at Talladega cost him dearly. A 9th place finish started to eat away at his national championship points advantage. The dog days of August began at Michigan with the lowest point of the DiGard season. The 22 car was forced to drop out of the race and posted a 34th place finish. A 3rd place finish the following week at Bristol didn't help enough, as Darrell Waltrip's consistent performance had shaved Allison's Winston Cup lead to only 41 points. Then the DiGard team went to victory lane at Darlington for their 4th victory of the season, and they came to Richmond with a belief that they had turned the momentum around. 56 points now separated Allison and Waltrip, and the tension in the garage at Richmond during race week could be cut with a knife. These two men had been here before.
Starting in the 6th position from Hueytown, Alabama, Bobby Allison.
As Bobby Allison moved through the crowded starting grid on the tricky half-mile at the Richmond Fairground Raceway, he was aware that Darrell Waltrip was the favorite in today's race. Allison's win last week at Darlington had been the first time he'd been able to finish ahead of the 11 car since the 4th of July race at Daytona, when Waltrip began to steadily cut away at Allison's points advantage for the national driving title. The short tracks are Darrell Waltrip's stock and trade. His super speedway performance is modest compared to Allison's, but Waltrip has muscle on the short tracks. Having already won 5 of the 8 short track events this season, it was important today for Allison to beat Waltrip on this half-mile oval. When racing on the little tracks, traffic can be a factor. From his 6th place starting position, Allison had to spend the early part of the race behind slower cars. He couldn't get by them to go up front and race with Waltrip. Once Allison got out of traffic, he quickly moved up to the lead pack. Before the afternoon was over, Allison would lead 212 of the event's 400 laps, including all of the final 116 to the checkered flag. That makes it 2 in a row for Allison and the DiGard team. In his 5th win of the season, Bobby registered his 2nd victory of the year on a track of less than a mile. The 22 car has not finished lower than 4th in the 8 short track races this year. Today's victory increased Allison's lead over Waltrip in the points race to 71 points. The trip to victory lane was getting to be a pleasant habit for the DiGard team, and after their win here in Richmond, they went to Dover, Delaware the following week and won again. The DiGard team came to Martinsville, Virginia to try for a 4th consecutive victory. The 22 car was 6th on the starting grid, and once again, Darrell Waltrip's 11 car was on the pole. The team was in top spirits, and both Jim and Bill Gardner were confident of continuing their excellent luck during these 4 weeks of fall.
Boy, it's heavy on brakes up here.
Ooh, man, you really got to lean on them down here. So you see the line on them?
I'm going to go over there because I can see better for you. I won't have to do this all day.
Okay. Yeah, you know what I mean?
There is no question that Waltrip would like to use a victory here at Martinsville to cut into Allison's Winston Cup points lead. Allison has never won on this track. Today could be the first of his career. This is a difficult track with long straightaways and tight turns. Essentially, it amounts to 2 drag races with a turn at each end. It features a lot of change in speed from the turns to the straights. It's hard on engines and a monster on brakes. The short tracks on the Winston Cup circuit are tough on team finances. The odds are high that your equipment is going to get torn up. Along with the stress on brakes and engines, the tires take a real beating. The top teams will go through 30 tires in a race like today's, and if they don't finish in the top 3, it's possible they won't even make enough to cover their tire bill for the afternoon. As the day wore on, it developed into a 3-way race between Allison, Waltrip, and the number 3 car of Ricky Rudd. When the afternoon was over, the checkered flag would belong to Ricky Rudd, and Allison would finish 2nd and Waltrip 3rd. Bobby Allison had increased his lead over Waltrip in the Winston Cup standings to 106 points. The first weekend of October brought the 2 teams to North Wilkesboro Speedway near the North Carolina home of Junior Johnson. Darrell Waltrip has won 4 consecutive events here. In spite of that fact, there were more than a handful of Bobby Allison fans in the crowd, hoping the leader of the Alabama gang would increase his points margin over Waltrip this afternoon. As the green flag came down, Waltrip was once again on the pole, and Allison would have to start racing from the 7th position. The DiGard crew and the Junior Johnson crew were side by side on pit row, and the morale of the 2 teams was high. They knew they'd have to beat each other, and the competition was really intense. The feelings between these 2 teams is the closest thing to a hill country feud since the Hatfield and McCoys. Once again, Waltrip drove a nearly flawless race at North Wilkesboro. Allison never could get close enough to challenge his dominance of the event. Bobby finished 3rd, behind Dale Earnhardt and Waltrip. The number 11 car drove into victory lane for only the 2nd time since Memorial Day. In the same period, Allison had registered 4 wins. However, Waltrip made it clear to the press that he felt confident about the rest of the season. Waltrip's victory today had cost Allison 15 points, and he now led the Winston Cup race by only 91 points, with only 4 events remaining in the Grand National season. As members of the motorsports press questioned him about the race, he had little to say. His disappointment showed. Allison has proven his driving ability time and time again. However, it is said that most drivers can be beaten somewhere along the line mentally.
Couldn't get it. Got close.
Yeah, it looked like it got close there up to about the halfway mark. Did it just sort of go away?
Yeah.
There was an unusual silence on Allison's part this October afternoon. It had rained during the night at the Charlotte Motor Speedway, but it appeared the weather would not delay the running of the Miller High Life 500. Allison and Waltrip stayed in the lead pack most of the day. The 22 car was having problems, and Waltrip was driving an exceptional race. Waltrip took the lead on the 295th lap, and it looked like he could stay up there for the remainder of the race. However, Richard Petty chased him down and took the lead from lap 312 to the checkered flag. Bobby's hold on the Winston Cup points lead would be cut to a margin of only 67 points. There was no suggestion of the problems to come as Petty and his crew came to the winner's circle. However, 4 hours later, after a post-race inspection of the 43 car, NASCAR officials would announce that they had found a tire violation and that Petty's engine had exceeded the maximum cubic inch displacement allowed. The team would be fined $35,000, and Petty would lose 104 Winston Cup points. However, Petty was allowed to keep his victory, the 198th of his 25-year Grand National racing career. It was a sad rain that fell on North Carolina Motor Speedway. The scheduled running of the Warner-Hodgson American 500 had been canceled and set for the following week, weather permitting. Most of the Grand National teams had returned to their homes, and the track was only fit for a child's game.
Starting today in this elite field, leading in the Winston Cup Points Championship chase by 67 points.
Allison and Waltrip started side by side on the grid. Waltrip has been the winner of the last 3 American 500s. This is a good track for a Junior Johnson car. The race was only 12 laps old when Donnie Allison, Bobby's brother, heard a problem up on turn 2. The yellow light came on. Allison had experienced the wildest wreck of his career here at Rockingham. The DiGard pit waited to see if Bobby had been involved. The 22 car was untouched, but the 11 car was hurt. Waltrip had suffered extensive damage in a crash involving 3 other cars. By lap 69, the 22 car was running second. And by lap 70, Allison took a lead that he would hold for the next 43 laps. Bobby moved out in front of the lead pack and ran alone. No one seemed to be able to run with him. Then on lap 113, he came around the track hurting. He had blown a tire and hit the 4th turn wall. The problems were major, and the car had to return to the garage area for repairs. A ball joint was broken and the fuel lines were damaged. If the DiGard team was to have a competitive run at the Winston Cup, they would have to get their car back into this race somehow. A racetrack is like a fickle lady. You can dance with her all afternoon, lap after lap, without an incident. And then when you are comfortable and believe the two of you have a mutual understanding, she changes her mind, and the afternoon is never the same again. Bobby Allison watched the progress of the race from the infield, a calm in the center of a storm that could mean the whole season. Before the race was over, the top 5 drivers in Winston Cup point standing had met misfortune on this 1-mile track atop a piney ridge where the Carolinas meet. Allison would finally finish 16th, only 27 points ahead of Darrell Waltrip in the Winston Cup standings. The afternoon of troubles at Rockingham would finally come to an end.
And the home of the brave.
The echo of Miss America's singing of the national anthem hung over the roar of the engines in the Atlanta Journal 500. Autumn color had just begun to show its way through the Georgia pines, and the fans came for the shootout between Allison and Waltrip. It was a lovely, warm afternoon for a stock car race. Allison started in 8th position and moved through traffic quickly. By the 20th lap, he had the 22 car up to the front of the pack. Before the afternoon would end, he would lead for 128 laps of the event. The fans watched as Allison pulled away from the field a 1/10 of a second at a time. Waltrip was having obvious trouble with the 11 car. He came into the pits on lap 90 for left side tires, and Junior Johnson reached in to change the wedge in the car. A lap later, the car was in for right side rubber. Something was wrong. The car was not competitive. By lap 127, Allison found Waltrip running on the back of the pack and lapped him, leaving Darrell a lap down and struggling. He would be there all afternoon. A spin-out on turn 1 brought out the yellow flag. As the field went into the pits, the DiGard team made a precision pit stop in the shadow of victory lane with a rainbow of the winner's circle almost close enough to touch. Though it is only 30 or 40 yards from pit road, the longest drive of any afternoon is the short distance into that magic circle of success. It was Allison's day. The setup was right. The handling was right. Then it all went wrong. After an accident on turn 4 brought out the yellow flag, the fans in the grandstand saw Allison head down pit road. He hit some debris and struck the inside of the pit wall and limped into the DiGard pit. With only 8 laps to go, the DiGard crew went to work to change the right front tire and repair the damage enough to get the car back into the race. The same gloomy lady that had sat over turn 4 at Rockingham had taken her place on turn 4 here at Atlanta, waiting for the appropriate time to take the victory out of Allison's grasp. Bill Gardner had watched it all slip away right in front of his eyes. Allison would have to accept a 3rd place finish. A certain win, lost to a $4 piece of scrap metal. After the grandstands had emptied, Gary Nelson took a lonely walk down pit road. From somewhere, night air blew a clean chill through the infield as the fading light of day touched the skid marks of Bobby's car, leading to the blackened retaining wall where he had hit. A man who plays out his life in front of thousands of people gets very few minutes of privacy. It seems that only when you lose can you really be alone. The Georgia sun was setting on the last race of the season in Dixie. The DiGard truck pulled into the garage area to load for the trip to California. Allison and Waltrip would have to settle this matter of the Winston Cup at Riverside. The last of the race fans were leaving. In the glow of the October dusk, a lone campfire in the infield marked the end of Grand National racing in the South until next year. Looking down on the 9-turn road course in Riverside, California, it is not immediately apparent what is on the line here today. The Winston Cup, the National Driving Championship. One race for the whole deal. Bobby Allison came to Riverside as one of the favorites to win. These were the last miles to the championship, and they wouldn't be easy. The motorsports press had emphasized that all Allison had to do was finish 13th or better, and the title was his. However, what they write the week before doesn't necessarily mean anything once the green flag is dropped. This is the 3rd year in a row the championship has gone to the final race between Waltrip and Allison. Waltrip had emerged the winner both years. It was going to be a long afternoon. Allison went through 4 cut tires, which put him a lap down. At one point, he ran in 27th place. Bobby worked his way back through traffic to make up the distance, while at the same time adhering to a pre-race strategy in which he agreed to run a conservative, cautious race. This was hard for a man who had spent 23 years driving hard to win. The national championship could be wiped out in a split second if Allison tangled with another driver on the track. The rain had left the trackside area soft and muddy. A spin-out could sink the wheels into a tractionless muck that would set the 22 car too far behind to remain competitive. After the tire problems were solved, a fuel problem developed, causing an erratic fuel flow and limiting the gas mileage on the 22 car. A week later, back in Charlotte, the DiGard crew would take the car apart and find that there was sugar in the gas tank. In addition to car problems, Gary Nelson had to take issue with NASCAR officials.
27 and 11. Tell them 22 won't tell how they got ahead of us.
The argument on whether Allison was improperly held back while other traffic passed him was never settled, and Gary backed off, choosing to concentrate on getting the car in position to win the Winston Cup. Waltrip had an excellent day, but with only 8 laps left, he collided with Tim Richmond coming out of the 9th turn as the two of them were battling for first place. The 11 cars spun off the track into the muddy infield. That was all it would take. The crew was hungry to celebrate, but Gary could not relax until he saw the black and white flag. He had been too close too often in these past few weeks to believe that it was over before it was over. Finally, Allison approached the final yards to the finish line in 9th place. Waltrip had finished 6th. The DiGard crew began the celebration they had sought all year. Allison had won the title by 47 points. Every time in the last 10 years these men had gone racing, they were dreaming of a moment like this. As the congratulations went all around and the crew awaited Allison's return to the garage area, one person found his way to the DiGard pits. There were no television cameras or news people here. They were all at Victory Lane. However, that made no difference to this man. He hadn't come to be seen, only to be the first to extend his congratulations. Darrell Waltrip knew what it felt like to win the title. He had won it twice. He wanted to make it 3 in a row this year. He hadn't quite managed that. It takes a champion to know the meaning of a championship season. Gary and his wife rushed through the downpour to join the crowd waiting to welcome Bobby in the garage area. The 22 car came home for the last time this season as Bobby Allison and the DiGard team had won their first national title. After the celebration here in Riverside, Allison's next stop was supposed to be New York City for the Winston Cup Awards. However, he would make a detour before he reached his final destination. On Thursday, the 6th of December, the man from Alabama was invited to a dinner party. It was held in Washington, D.C. His host was the President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. The guest list of Nancy and Ronald Reagan included the King and Queen of Nepal. However, Bobby and Judy Allison were the only stock car racing people at dinner that night. That was not the case the following evening in New York City. In the elegant grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, 900 people from the world of motorsports gathered for the NASCAR Winston Cup Awards banquet. After all these years, the DiGard team made it to the head table. It was a proud night for everyone. Not only did Allison receive the championship trophy and Winston Cup belt buckle, but he was also voted the most popular driver by the NASCAR membership for the 6th time in his career.
Bill, you've been trying, you've done it. Congratulations, and you've got a great team.
Bill Gardner finally achieved the moment he has been pursuing all these years. With his brother Jim, he has taken DiGard Racing from obscurity to the #1 team in the world of stock car racing. In the midst of the festivities, Allison received a long-distance telephone call from President Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. President. What a thrill to be with you and Mrs. Reagan last night, for me and my wife Judy, and what a thrill to have this call from you tonight. Thank you, sir.
Moments after Allison completed his conversation with Ronald Reagan, Vice President George Bush and his wife Barbara arrived to extend their congratulations to Allison.
It's a privilege to stand next to this outstanding champion. Those of you who were down in the pits and stuff got to watch him. Last night he's dining at the White House, and now he's at the Waldorf Astoria. I don't know what he's doing tomorrow night, but nevertheless, Barbara and I just wanted to come by and congratulate all the sportsmen and sportswomen here. Thank you for your contribution to the heartbeat of America, and to congratulate Bobby Allison. Thank you very, very much.
It was a proud occasion for Judy Allison, who had her first date with Bobby when she was only 16 years old. 23 years of marriage and 4 children later, she could still remember when he drove a '38 Chevy Coupe to school with race numbers painted on the side. On the weekends, he bolted on a set of race tires to go racing. He's been racing ever since. DiGard is the 22nd different team that Allison has driven for in his 29 years of racing. They have been good for each other. They needed one another to achieve this mutual lifelong dream. And next year, they will be back together again on the high-banked ovals at Daytona and Talladega, Charlotte and Atlanta. You'll find them together on the narrow strip at Darlington and flat turns of Michigan and Pocono. They'll be on the twisting road circuit at Riverside and the tight little ovals at Nashville and Martinsville. You'll find them running flat-out Dixie style with 35 to 40 other men who have more courage than sense, chasing their way into the late afternoon sunset, looking for that 1/10 of a second that will bring out the cheers of the crowd to echo in their memories in the years to come.